What's up and what's happening, TPE fam? We're back with another amazing episode of the Pivot Experience, where we're all about taking you from where you currently are to your next. I've had the opportunity to do some pretty cool things in my lifetime, but I never would have thought I would have someone who is I don't know the proper term of saying this, across the water. Somebody's from out of the country. To be specific, he is from Australia. I had the opportunity to do his podcast that released back in April, the Principles of Hospitality podcast. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, go to Instagram, type in Principles of Hospitality. This gentleman's podcast should come up. I've enjoyed this content for quite some time now. I really appreciate him showing me a great amount of hospitality by allowing me coming on his platform, and I'm going to try to do my best to match and come close to what he is done. And here we go. We are welcoming Shaun from the Principles of Hospitality podcast onto the TPE. How are you doing, Shaun?
Hey, Alex. I'm great, man. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
For sure, for sure. No, I think when we agreed to do your show, you brought up the prospect of doing mine, and that didn't even cross my mind, to be honest with you. I wasn't even thinking about bringing on your show. I didn't think I had, you being on my show, because I know if you would agree to it, but you're the one that brought it up, and I'm really appreciative of the friendship. I think we are fostering a relationship, a long distance relationship, as it relates to just the content that you're producing, the impact that you're having on the landscape of hospitality in Australia, what we're doing here in the United States as far as just the number one I work with as the operating partner for Chick-fil-A, and then the outside things that I do that push leadership development and really just speak to things that you're passionate about as well, man. So for those of us who don't know you, in a nutshell, could you explain, one, who is Shaun? What are your interests and passions, and two, what brought you to hospitality?
Great question. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I think the one thing that definitely connects us is the hospitality industry, and that's what always connects people, no matter how far or close they are together. I've been fortunate to be in the hospitality industry for just over 25 years now, so lucky to be in my early 40s. The reason I really joined it was I've always had an appreciation for food and really loved to cook for people, have always been deeply empathetic, and just loved the idea of making a product for someone and seeing their excitement about it. So started pretty early on when I was 16 in the baking industry, and learned to be a baker quite early on. And then owned bakeries early on in my career from the age of sort of 21 to my late 20s, and then started to work in a lot of QSR restaurants, fast food restaurants at that stage, and sort of learn the craft of fast service, and a bit like what you do, Alex, but just in a not as amplified format as Chick-fil-A. And then worked in a lot of different sort of independent venues, where they'd be cafes, salad bars, desserts, fine dining sort of stuff. I've been fortunate enough to be up and around a lot of different brands for my career. The podcast Principle of Hospitality, as you said, that's been going the last 6 years under a couple of different names, and we've had it under Principle of Hospitality for the last couple of years now. We're about 250 episodes in, so really fortunate to have those conversations over the last 6 years. And we talk to people in the industry about the industry, really around leadership, innovation, technology, management, a whole lot of different things. And we're leading into different conversations now, which is fantastic. And I have a consulting brand as well called Open Pantry Consulting. So we work with hospitality businesses to either start up or scale up, working on basically operations and also training and development of people. So that's kind of where we sit. And I've been really, really fortunate to be in the opportunity, have the opportunity, I should say, to be in the industry for such a long time.
Yeah, man, no, that's incredible. I did not realize you were in the industry for 25 years. You probably said that during our conversation, but they kind of maybe missed me at the time. But I guess I want to kind of sit on something you said toward the back end of your intro, and I just want to kind of talk about the podcast a little bit. And it kind of made me think about one of the first things I wanted to ask you, and that was probably, if you can think about it, what is one of the most memorable guests that you've had on the show, and then what made their story stand out to you? I mean, to say you're 240 episodes in, you've gotta have. This might be hard for you to do, just given the
Super hard.
the amount of conversation that you have. Like, give me something like either that really was intriguing to you, or wonky, or maybe both. No need to put you on the
Yeah,
spot
for
there,
sure.
but yeah, no, let's yeah. So I'm curious to know, who was that and what was the story.
Yeah, I think outside of our conversation, Alex, and of course that was episode 239. Just to let everyone know if they want to have a listen to that. I always think like the last conversation I had is the most exciting, because it's the most fresh in my mind, and every week that we release a new podcast, I always feel extremely overwhelmed with the fact that we get to have a conversation with someone that's so deep and meaningful at that point in time. So I'm always beneficial and really thankful for that. When I look back on the catalog that we had, I probably look back to episode 131, which we did a couple of years ago now because we release every Thursday, and that's with a great person that we know really well, with the principal of hospitality team, Leon Kennedy. So after this conversation, he actually became a host about 6 months after. So we've got a couple of different hosts that we use for the podcast. And Leon comes out of a extensive experience in the coffee industry here in Melbourne. And the last sort of 6 months since the podcast has actually happened, he's running a hospitality group which is independent, and they do a lot of fast casual offers, wine bars. They have their own coffee brand, a very, very normal thing which is happening in Australia at the moment, this diversification of people's hospitality portfolios. And the reason why that was impactful to me was he's just such a great leader. He's such a great conversationalist. He deeply cares about the industry and the people that he leads. And he just has a love for all things hospitality. And the great thing about a podcast, whether it be visual, audio, or both, but especially if it's audio, you can hear someone's warmth and personality through their voice. And that's the real thing I love about podcasting. So if people are going to listen to that one, they'll definitely hear that with that conversation. The other thing was, at that point in time when we recorded that a couple of years ago, probably most of our podcasts sat at sort of the 30-minute to 40-minute bracket. And that podcast with Leon went for 76 minutes, and it could have gone a lot longer than that. But we recorded that. I think we started recording about 9 p.m. at night, and we were sort of just getting tired. And what happened was we sort of just rounded it out, and then he became a host, so we can learn more about his story in time as well, as he interviewed other people in the industry. So that's probably the one that comes to mind the most, Alex.
Oh, awesome, man. No, I think it's in the beauty of podcasting, it's really personal to you, or you can make it personal to you. I've had the opportunity to be able to talk to some people who I felt like, wow, we've had a long relationship already, but to be able to document and record and engage in thoughtful conversation with somebody who you have a lot of respect for, it's just, I think it's remarkable what this platform and how popular it has gotten, it has given us the opportunity to be able to do. So I think that's awesome that you have that opportunity, had that opportunity, and have had several other opportunities to be able to replicate what that feeling is. So with all that being said, I would imagine it would make sense that you need to stay on top of what the current trends are. Like, if you're talking to all of these restaurateurs and these people who are focused on about hospitality, I would assume that you wouldn't want to come to the plate totally as a novice as it relates to the craft, right? And so,
Yep.
how do you stay up to date with dropping episodes every week, with what you do in your consultancy? How do you stay like abreast and aware of the latest trends in hospitality and in your area?
Yeah, I think the podcast actually gives me a lot of information. And when I sit and talk to people about their career or about the brands they're working with, it usually after the podcast it leads to more conversations, right, in which I get to learn more. So the one thing I've done, sort of in this part of my career, Alex, is the ability to listen more than talk. And the more I listen to people about their experiences and what they're seeing within the industry, I find that really helps me with my investigation and my knowledge of the industry for other clients. Of course, there's sort of the normal stuff like the industry publications that happen, a lot of different online resources and things that we subscribe to get information. There's some great industry conferences which happen here, both in Melbourne and in Sydney, most likely. There's monthly events that we go to for a couple of different brands that have panel discussions or just keynote talks. And obviously social media platforms, right? Like that's how that we connected, obviously through Instagram earlier on this year. And we find obviously social media a really good driver for us to understand, especially what people are caring about in the food and beverage scene, and what's really popping. So the one good thing about the Australian market um, in regards with what comes through as being popular is we can look to America because they're probably about 3 to 6 months ahead, especially on what we see on the West Coast. They're probably about 3 to 6 months ahead of what the trend that we'll see in Australia. So it actually gives us a bit of time to push on a trend if we need to. But those timelines have sort of shortened up the last couple of years, but it's still usually the trend that America is the leader. So we look to the US a lot for inspiration for sure.
So you say that last line with a bit of humor, and I kind of want to I want to kind of poke at that a little bit. So it's
Sure.
because it's sounding like that Australia is starting to catch up in trend. That's what it sounds like you said. At least so it's getting
Yeah.
the gap is getting shorter in terms of
Mm.
catching up with trend. Is it that you feel like it's catching up with trend, or you guys are developing y'all's own trend, like apart from the U.S. or you know?
Yeah, like it's interesting. I think Australian culture is very much to not be as proud of what we're doing as what a culture like America does. The one thing America does really well is be really confident about what they're producing and what they're talking about. The Australian sort of understanding is that we're a bit more laid back. We're a bit more shy in the fact that we don't want to promote what we're doing, and sometimes that means that we're following trends rather than actually at the head of those trends. I definitely think in the coffee industry, especially here in Melbourne and in Sydney, it's like pretty well renowned that it has some of the best coffee roastering and drinking facilities in the world. And it's definitely feedback that we get from people who are from overseas. So I think in regards with amazing coffee bars and cafes, I think we're definitely industry leaders in Australia. But when we look to other things like QSR and fast food, I think definitely America is ahead of the game just by sheer weight of numbers. Like America has close to 10 times the population of Australia, but Australia is the same land size as what America is, right? So just by the opportunity to have more brands and have more creativity in a space like America, it's usually going to be ahead of the trend of what we're seeing here in Australia. Um, but definitely, like if you look at there's an Australian brand that's sitting in America with about 50 odd venues at the moment. And we've had the CEO on the podcast before. It's a brand called Bluestone Lane Coffee. And they're with an Australian vernacular and cuisine type going through their whole brands. And you can sort of see that Australian cafe environment coming through to the US market. So I think those kind of things are above trend with what you would classify as like American kind of culture because it was born from an Australian CEO. But other than that, like definitely America is still ahead of the game for sure.
So when you talk about coffee and when you compare Australian, and I apologize if I'm minimizing it by just saying coffee, right? I'm not trying to be,
No, good.
yeah, I am not trying to be disrespectful or anything. But when you compare, when I don't drink coffee, so my my knowledge around coffee is very limited. I just know I don't drink it, but I know that Starbucks is a big deal here. Like it's a huge deal. And so is Starbucks a big deal in Australia, or B, what would be comparable to Starbucks in Australia, and C, what's the difference between what Starbucks does in your observation and what you guys do in Australia?
Yeah, so I think in most sectors of the market, what doesn't work well is, especially in the coffee industry, is chain-based brands. So Starbucks came here, it would have been probably close to 15 to 20 years ago initially, and they rolled out and they did really poorly, right? And they pretty much closed all their sites, and then they got taken over by new ownership, and then basically revamped, and they've that although they're not sort of in the high street more than anything else, like they're much more in the sort of outer suburban market here in Australia. So they're not sort of in the city centres nearly as much. So they sort of found a place in outer suburbia and a bit, and inner city slightly, but definitely it's not a massive brand here. Everyone knows what Starbucks is, of course, but it's definitely not seen as like a front runner in the coffee scene. So Australians really love an independent brand, and they like things being small rather than things being big for most parts of the hospitality industry. It's a complete flip on what the American culture is like. We sort of back the little guy, we back, the smaller brands more than anything else. And it's a case of like when something gets too big, people become a bit more worried about that, or like, why are you becoming big? Like, you should remain small. It's kind of like the thinking of like your favorite band and how they release like their first album, right? And then they release their second album. It's not nearly as good, or you think it's not. You want them to remain small. So it's kind of like that analogy with Australian culture with food and hospitality. It's super flip from what happens in the US. But I think that'll definitely change as the population changes. We become a bigger industry.
That is crazy. There's literally a Starbucks everywhere. like
Yes.
and we where we live is considered somewhat like a small city, a small town, but just like there's a Starbucks in the Target, there's a Starbucks outside of the Kroger, there's a Starbucks inside of the Kroger, there's just like you can get Starbucks everywhere. It's crazy. Sorry, I digressed. I got a little distracted. Okay, now what would you say? Okay, with the current layout of the economy and how you guys have a high sense of, I guess, local shopping small, which is awesome. Transparently, I would like in our area to be more like that. I mean, we have a lot of great small businesses, a lot of great small entrepreneurs that would do well if they got more support. But everybody usually goes big box, so those smaller guys doesn't get as much opportunity as the bigger guys do. But what are some of the challenges that you guys face in the area of hospitality in Australia right now? And then how do you think? And I think you kind of maybe touched on this already. How do you think it's going to be remedied?
Um, I think the challenges in Australia are very similar to what I'm hearing in the US, right? So we're obviously labor shortages are obviously very challenged. The last 3 years, so much talent, long service talent has left the industry and decide or changed the way they want to work in the industry, so they don't want to work nearly as much as what they used to. Increasing competition here, so as we get smaller brands that start to grow and do really really well, what we're seeing is a lot more food and beverage establishments be part of like new housing developments or new commercial developments. When you have a different footfall here, which isn't nearly as high as what the US is, it makes it incredibly challenging, and obviously increasing costs. So rental costs, leasing costs are now growing post pandemic. Obviously, wages costs with the fact you've got labor shortages mean you have to pay people more, and obviously supply chain, like the just increases in things, simple things like oil and potatoes and chips and things like that. Like, it's just astronomical. We work with a lot of different brands across the sector, and just see consistent increases in cost of goods, which is obviously affecting menu pricing, which then affects inflation, right? So there's just a trickle on effect which happens there. So there's a lot of challenges at the moment. There's a lot of people who are still growing their brand. The one thing which I said before the pandemic is the brands that really stood for something, the ones that really had a point of difference, will be the ones that survived, and the ones that what I call vanilla brands, or the ones that just turn up and do the same burrito or do the same cup of coffee or whatnot, probably won't survive. Like, they'll probably struggle to grow. So that's what we're sort of seeing play out now that we're post pandemic, and we're on the sort of new trajectory of what food and hospitality is going to be.
So it's basically the brands and companies that are leaning into their uniqueness and what kind of what they stand for. Is it socially or just their story and values? You think?
Yeah, I think all of the above, Alex. So
Okay.
what we're seeing is a lot more talk about, founder led stories and actually what the brand is about, but also a changing of the guard in who's leading these businesses. And the one good thing that we'll see in the long run about the labor shortages at the moment is that leadership is changing. So it's less people who less because so much talent has left the industry. Now what we're seeing is a lot more diverse ranges of leadership, which was definitely needed in a market like Australia, and that's only going to, in the long run, going to build to better and stronger hospitality industry. So that's what we're sort of starting to see now, but that's just going to take a bit of time. But that's really exciting for me that the hospitality industry and the leadership around it is evolving and changing.
And I think we the idea of hospitality is taking on just a different level of appreciation when it comes down. I think COVID has kind of assisted in that thought. People are appreciating the human touch a little bit more because we were being so out of the human touch for that period in time. And it's funny that you kind of equate the changing of the guard and leadership as going to be the boost and the spark, because you're starting to get younger people with the perspective. The people who are spending the dollar now, who's making more of the dollar now, are going to be at the helm in terms of what we do to make decisions. And so I think that's important, and not only in hospitality and just multiple phases and facets of life. I think at the core of what we do, and when we talk about hospitality, is usually relegated to food. But when you think about hospitality, it goes so much further than just food. I think being hospitable, is applicable and should be managed and grown in all areas of your life. I think this it things would just be better if we adopted that mindset. But I don't want to go on a tangent. So in your opinion, my man, what makes a business successful from a hospitality standpoint? Like what, in all your conversations, again, just leaning on all that knowledge that you have. What have you seen in your opinion that drives that success? Are there any like common traits, any common threads or patterns that you see from those business that make them successful?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a really great question. I think definitely the ones that have a story behind them, right? So how the founders chose to do what they do, and why they're making the decisions they're making around their food and beverage and service. Obviously, brands who have a strong customer focus. Like we're seeing so much tech come into the industry at the moment, which is fantastic, and will leave to the opportunity to balance out the staff shortages that we have. But as you know, like with your role in Chick-fil-A, like the importance of the customer experience and the human interaction like far outweighs any technology. Um, well trained and dedicated team, right? So making sure you're onboarding your staff correctly, you're really caring about their training and involvement will lead to a better customer experience because your employee experience is on point. Always thinking about how you can continuously improve the brand offering, and making sure that you can look after your team. Uh, Unique selling proposition, like what is going to make you different? What is going to be that one thing which pop through, which people are going to know about for your brand and signify as being your brand? The ability to be adaptable and flexible. Like your brand will have to evolve and change over time. Most people will sign 5, 7, 10-year leases. It might still be a cafe, it might still be a QSR venue, it might still be a fast food venue, but it's going to evolve and change to meet customer demand over that period of time. So be adaptable. Make sure you got great employee development programs, and you're really making sure that people stay for a good amount of time in your business, but not too long as well. Like give them amount of time they want to stay for that, to be a revolutionary with inside your business and change it for the better. And the last thing is like a positive work culture. Culture is so important. I know you know that all too well, Alex. But workplace culture is so subjective in some venues and in hospitality. The one good thing coming out of COVID is I think we're developing a better culture in the hospitality industry, and we've got to push that through because there's a lot of things which we can do right on the backside of this pandemic, which is so positive for the industry.
No, man, that was if you missed the boat in school, if you didn't, if you missed it in training, you just gave, I think, a great snapshot of what it means not to run a great business, not just a business of hospitality. Like, if you take those core, those things that you listed out, I'm going to have to go back and listen to this again to make sure that I get it written down, or if I need to document it a little bit better, because the way you put that was very well put. Thank you so much. For the listeners out there, if you did not catch that, rewind 5 minutes back and grab that, because a lot of, here's the thing. A lot of us believe that if we have a great product, that's all we need, or if we have the prime location, that's all we need, or man, running a great business is a medley of things going well, all at the same time. It can't be January, we're focused on customer service, and that's all you do well, and the product is bad. And then February is about the product, but you can't scale at a level as some of these brands. Well, not so much in Australia. I guess you guys don't want to scale like a super scale, right? But here you don't scale unless you encompass all of those things that my man Shaun just listed out. I mean, sure, we can go into great detail about each silo, but those are the silos. The only thing we really didn't talk about, which like I said, may have missed it, is the financial return component. You've got to have. We're not nonprofits, and he didn't touch on that, but everything else, we got about 95% of the pie covered. Thank you so much for that, Shaun. That was an incredible response, for real, for real. And so, last but certainly not least, man, I want to just kind of pick your brain a little bit, and if you could just peel back the veil. No, you've already opened the curtain. It's not even peeking back the veil. I think I've gotten. I take that little zinger out of there. Like, you've kind of kicked the door open. But I will say, what is some advice that you would have for somebody that's just starting out in the hospitality industry, given everything that you know about long-standing businesses? I'm sure you know how they began. What would you tell them to help them get started and then attain success in the field?
Yeah, for sure. I think if you're looking like for your first job or your first role in the hospitality industry, the one great thing about hospitality is it's so broad. Like, you can literally stay in the hospitality industry for your whole career and do many, many different things. But your first start and your first job is like incredibly important. So really research what kind of role that you think you want to do, and more importantly, what kind of brand you want to work for. The benefit in things like social media now is we get such an understanding of what brands stand for. So you could that's really use that as your smell test about what kind of brand that you actually want to work in. So when you obviously come into that brand and hopefully you're hired, like, the normal things apply, right? Work hard, listen more than talk, develop communication skills that are really important. The great thing about the hospitality industry is it teaches you so much about soft skills that you can't really learn in many other industries at all. Those soft skills are going to benefit you in so many other forms of your life as well. Um, Maintain a passion for the hospitality industry. Really learn from customers, learn what they're talking to you about. I don't believe that customers come in and want us to have a bad day. Like, just learn from those experiences, because the 99% of people that you serve are going to be good and great. So make sure you learn from those. Always adapt to sort of new situations that are coming through. Um, Always make sure you're seeking mentorship by those above you. Like, there's always going to be a person with inside any business that you're working with, which is a great leader that you can learn from. So make sure you develop that. Learn new skills all the time. Like, the benefit of being in the hospitality industry, as I said, like, you can do so many different things. So make sure you can do different roles within inside the business. And as you get older and you start to learn those management techniques, like, build those industry connections as well. Like, you'll get an opportunity to sit at the table with different people and build those connections and those kind of things that are really going to benefit your projection in the your trajectory into the industry. I've been fortunate, when I was 16 and my first boss, I still talk to now, and I see him as a really important mentor in my career, but also my personal life. Like, make sure you're seeking out those people and you're open to those conversations. If you're starting out and you want to do a business in the hospitality industry, all I'd say is be patient. Like, really think about the venue that you want to open, why you want to open it. As you said before, Alex, like we're not for profits here. Like we're here to make money. Like the benefit of making money in the hospitality industry, the offside of that is that we get to deliver great experiences for people. We get to build community and we get to change people's lives in different ways. That's the benefit in that. But the first thing we need to do is actually make money so we can do all those things. So making sure you're patient in the space that you actually want to do, and you research deeply before you make decisions, because hospitality is not a cheap game, and you need to make sure you make the right decisions that you can stay in business and you can do all those great things that are so important to hospitality.
Man, thank you so much. I'm sure if anybody's out there who's interested in wanting to open your own restaurant, advance where you currently are. You know, if you're in a partnership, I think Shaun has given us a master class. I wonder if I can figure out how to package this and sell it over here. Just
You're
just kidding.
welcome.
just kidding. No, man, this is going to go out on all our platforms. Any way you can find our content will in long form and in short form for sure, man. Shaun, I can't tell you thank you enough for agreeing to show up here today. And I didn't mention this. I meant to mention this earlier, and I apologize if I did, if this is redundant. The time difference. I don't know if we talked about that, at least on air. I did not realize that when I told Shaun the time that I told him that it was going to be 7:30 a.m. his time. And so I don't know if Shaun has family that's sleeping. He's in the corner, maybe trying to make this work. I'm not sure, but I definitely appreciate your time because it was convenient for me. I apologize for that. And if it was inconvenient for you, man, I can't wait till we get a chance to do this again. But before we get out of here, where can we find you? Your website? How can we do business with you if we ever decide have an opportunity to do so?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, thanks, Alex, for having me on the show. Don't worry about the time difference. I'm a former baker, so early mornings are good with me. Uh, Definitely either go to principleofhospitality.com. That's where you'll find everything about the podcast, and you can also link into me. Or the consulting part of what we do is openpantryconsulting.com. So those are two places to find me. Really active on LinkedIn, really active on Instagram as well, where we connected as well, Alex. So I'm sure people can find me pretty easily.
Yeah, and check out the episode that I was on. I'm not going to tell you the number.
100%.
I want you to just look through the different episodes, the different content. Don't just go to the page and come find me and get out of there. Try to get some value, because as you can hear here on this platform, Shaun is well versed in what he's talking about. I believe that he understands hospitality, and if COVID didn't teach us anything, is that hey, the food folks are here to stay. Okay. No matter what's going on in the world, the people who produce food and they do it well will always have a home in this economy, this global economy. And so, man, thank you so much, Shaun, for pouring into not only our listeners, but into me. Definitely appreciate this, the wisdom that you have shared on the platform. And TPE family, if you don't get anything out of this one, I don't know what I'm doing. I might have to hang it up. Anyway, just kidding. Until next time, TPE family, peace.
Great to be sitting here with my boy Alex. We're talking all things hospitality, all things leadership. It's amazing to see what he's doing with the pivot experience and everything he's doing, the leadership boy. I'm Shaun de Vries, so I'm from Australia. You'll see me from Melbourne, obviously, here with Principle of Hospitality and Open Pantry Consulting.